When all the nation had finished passing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Take 12 men from the people, from each tribe a man, and command them, saying, 'Take 12 stones from here out of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over with you and lay them down in the place where you lodge tonight.'" Then Joshua called the 12 men from the people of Israel, whom he had appointed, a man from each tribe. And Joshua said to them, "Pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and take up each of you a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, that this may be a sign among you. When your children ask in time to come, 'What do these stones mean to you?' then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever." And the people of Israel did just as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones out of the midst of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, just as the Lord told Joshua. And they carried them over with them to the place where they lodged and laid them down there. And Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the covenant had stood. And they are there to this day. For the priests bearing the ark stood in the midst of the Jordan until everything was finished that the Lord commanded Joshua to tell the people, according to all that Moses had commanded Joshua. The people passed over in haste, and when all the people had finished passing over, the ark of the Lord and the priests passed over before the people. The sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh passed over armed before the people of Israel, as Moses had told them. About 40,000 ready for war passed over before the Lord for battle to the plains of Jericho. On that day, the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they stood in awe of him just as they had stood in awe of Moses all the days of his life. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Command the priests bearing the ark of the testimony to come up out of the Jordan." So Joshua commanded the priests, "Come up out of the Jordan." And when the priests bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord came up from the midst of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet were lifted up on dry ground, the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all of its banks as before. The people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they encamped at Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. And those 12 stones, which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up at Gilgal. And he said to the people of Israel, "When your children ask their fathers in times to come, 'What do these stones mean?' then you shall let your children know, 'Israel passed over this Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever." Have you ever faced something that seems impossible, or are you facing something that still does seem impossible? Today, on the day that we are filming this devotional, it's an anniversary for our family that marks one of the most trying times that we've ever experienced. And I realize that other people have experienced times that were probably significantly harder, but in this chapter of our family's life, it really made us dig deeper into our faith. And when I tell you what it is, you may not see why it's such a big deal, but I'm going to go ahead and share it with you because it still points me back to the way that God is faithful in all of the ways that he works in our lives. So today is the day that we closed on our home in St. Augustine. We were buying and selling at the same time, and we faced a mountain of obstacles that didn't seem possible without God working and opening the doors for us. We went from listing our house to closing on both homes within about 6 weeks. And those 6 weeks were probably the most anxiety-filled and hope-filled times that we have ever experienced. If you've ever sold and bought a home at the same time, you know that there are obstacles that occur and come up. There were things that happened with us that we never should have been able to purchase the home that we are currently in. There were times that we went and drove past the house and stopped and prayed as a family of 5, holding hands on the driveway of the home, with all of our now neighbors being able to see us doing this. And what kind of crazy people do those kinds of things? This was a neighborhood that everybody waves in, and when we did finally move in, someone came down and said, "Hi, welcome to the neighborhood. I'd love to share with you about our church, and if you don't have a church home, we'd love to invite you to come and join us." It just felt like this was the place that God really wanted us to be. And the reason that I'm sharing with you about this is because as I was prepping for this devotional, I came across a sermon from a preacher who had taught through this chapter in Joshua. He mentioned how the Israelites must have felt as they reached the Jordan and they were so close to reaching the promised land, and that they must have felt the way you did the first time you opened the door to your new house. And that reminded me of this time where God was very faithful, and all of the things that should not have worked out for us actually did. I mean, I can go back to the day that we signed the documents on the home and the computer system went down, and we had made an offer, and our agent and the person that worked for the builder said there's no way that they're going to accept this. And the next day we found out that because their computer systems had been down, they just rushed through our contract. So all the things that we didn't think we would ever get or be able to live in this neighborhood, God allowed us to do that. The other part is that they refused to allow us to have a contingency that if our home that we had currently had didn't sell, we could back out. And God brought us a huge number of showings, and when it seemed like we weren't going to get one or get an offer, God brought us an offer that allowed us to close at a really similar date, only 1 day apart. So it was just God working out all these different things. And when we were waiting for all of the offers, we had an agent who is a believer that we're still friends with. And I remember we were all very discouraged, not sure that anything was going to align for us. And he sent me a text message that was very long. And it was a prayer of, God, if this is your will, allow these doors to open. God, if this is what you have for the Walter family, please allow us to be confident in these choices and in this decision. And if it's not, close the door. I don't know that I've ever met another person who would be that vulnerable in that position. As a realtor, we are the way that they make their paycheck, but he was prioritizing God's will in our family's life. And for that, I'm very thankful, because as I was reading through this, that becomes a memorial stone for our family. Almost every time that we pull up or we're walking around our neighborhood, it is a reminder of God's faithfulness. And so that feeling for us probably pales dramatically in comparison to how the Israelites were feeling as they were wandering through the desert for 40 years, waiting for this time that God would fulfill his promise, waiting for that whole generation to pass so that they would be able to step into the land. And to finally see the fulfillment of the promise that God had made to Abraham. In their journey to Canaan, they had to cross the Jordan. And I'm not sure exactly what the Jordan River was like at that time. I really don't even know what it's like now. But commentaries share that the river was at its flood stages and was therefore impossible to cross. I think we've all seen something like this before. Even just driving around, you can see how the water ebbs and flows around us in St. Johns County. So to imagine that you had to cross this body of water with this huge number of people, it seems like an impossible task. But we remember that God parted the Red Sea for the Israelites when they were fleeing Egypt and leaving in the Exodus. And God parted the seas again as the Israelites were crossing the Jordan. This is just another way that we can see God's faithfulness and how he works to fulfill his promises. After the Israelites crossed over, Joshua was given directions from God. He was to pick 12 men, one from each tribe. And when those men were picked, they had to go and select a stone from the middle of the Jordan and carry them with them where they camped at Gilgal. I can imagine that that was a hard task. And maybe if they had not been obedient, what it would have looked like. But their obedience and listening to what Joshua had said to them, because they were listening in obedience to God, allows other people to see the memorial stones and to continue to be reminded about God's faithfulness, even and especially when things seem impossible. The stones were stacked so that the children of Israel would see them and know that stones did not usually stay like that. They would be able to ask questions about why the stones were like that. In verses 21 through 24, Joshua said, "When your children ask their fathers in times to come, 'What do these stones mean?' then you shall let your children know, 'Israel passed over this Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever.'" This is a reminder for me in my own personal life, and I hope that it is for you. I want to be the person that shares the memorial stones of what God has done in my life with my children, with my husband, with my family, and with my friends. And that's my challenge for you. We can get so busy and distracted that maybe we don't remember all the things that God has done, the big or the small, the mighty or the seemingly could be coincidental, but we know better as believers. We know that God meets and fulfills our needs as long as we are in his will. And my challenge for you is, how can we apply this to our lives? How can we be obedient like the Israelites were and carry those stones with us? How can we share what God has done in our personal testimony and as we have grown closer to him in our walk? The other thing that makes me very convicted is I wonder if my children remember this story of our home as much as I do. It was a big deal. It was a huge, mighty work of God in our lives. And I'm not sure that my children remember it the same way that I do. I don't think that they remember how much we prayed, how many people prayed alongside us, and how many times God answered those prayers and gave us more than we could possibly have ever imagined, and put us in a place that we absolutely love and adore and are surrounded by good people, and how that work has continued in our lives, bringing us here, allowing me to be on staff here, allowing our children to be in a great school environment. It just makes me remember that in all the ways and times that God has worked in our lives, I can go back to this point and make it relatable for everyone, I'm sure, because everyone has faced that uncertainty at some point, right? Whether you didn't hear from the apartment company, so you're not sure if they accepted your application, that way that disrupts your life and still being able to see God's faithfulness. So I encourage you to go back into this chapter, dig deeper into it, do the research to try to figure out exactly what obstacles they had faced and what the landscape may have looked like in this. And I hope that this was encouraging for you as it was encouraging for me.